Okay, so welcome to Module 2 of the CAPF 70-5 training. This module is about eServices. We're going to talk a lot about WIMRs and then ops quals, and we're going to start doing the first homework and prerequisites towards the CAP 70-5. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen onto eServices, a very quick intro on eServices. So this is the portal that we're going to be using a lot during this training. We'll find, training material, videos, tools to submit our documents, WIMRs, the tools we use to file stories, and a lot of stuff. So we will be spending a lot of time on this page, on this portal. So when you log in, oh great. I need to log in for real. There we go. So these are the tools that I have put in my favorites. The main ones that we will be discussing today are WIMRs, and then the Learning Management System Access and Ops Qual. So if you had a chance to read one of the documents that was in the homework, you'll see that there is a way to create these shortcuts. And basically, if you click on your name, and then you go to favorite applications, then as you click on these stars, when the star turns yellow, then they will be bookmarked. And so when you go back to your eServices, then you'll see them appearing here. And so it's a shortcut to get straight to that page. So we're going to start with WIMRs, and then, as I said, Learning Management System, and then Ops Quals. And so, Major McCutcheon, please take it away with WIMRs.
Great, Antonio, thanks very much. I'll share my screen here. And everybody should be able to see my screen here. Antonio is going to be acting as the class proctor. So my name is Major Peter McCutcheon. I've been with Civil Air Patrol since 2005, and very excited to be able to present this presentation to you with regards to WIMRs. This is a somewhat of a long presentation. It's will be recorded. It's being recorded right now, so you can review this recording and the material associated with the recording at a later time if you missed something. I will be taking a break during some of the slides to answer questions that you leave in the chat. And then Antonio will read the questions, and then we can try to answer them as best we possibly can. I'm glad to see George is on the call too. So if anything has to do with operations from Cal Wing or how our processes work, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer those for you. My role in CAP right now is I'm a member of Squadron 10, and I've been a mission pilot, a mission observer, mission scanner, AOBD, FRO. So I've held a lot of interesting positions within this organization for a long period of time. So hopefully I'll be able to convey at least some of the experiences I've had personally and some of the examples that we're going to share today with regards to WIMRs specifically. So on that note, let me go ahead and click through this, and we can go from there. So basically the introductions, we've got those taken care of here. Questions, as I mentioned, I want to reiterate though, don't raise your hand or anything like that, or open your microphone, but please use that chat system there, and then we'll review those later on. We are going to be covering the WIMRs environment today. We're going to be talking about the different mission types, symbols, profiles, sorties, what you as a pilot need to do and view before you get into the airplane and get going. So we're going to cover ORM. We're going to cover the TOL Excel worksheet briefly here. We're not actually going to do anything with the spreadsheet itself, but I do have some screenshots that I want to show how it does work. And work that. Weight and balance, you're all pilots or proposed pilots, so you know what weight and balance is all about and how important it is. And then we're going to talk about the discrepancy log, or what we call AMRAD. There's a section within WIMRs that's very, very important as you do your flights. It's the Form 104 section of WIMRs that tells us a little bit about what you're going to do on that particular sortie. So we'll review that. The roles and responsibilities of the flight release officer, and what are the different types of flight release officers and what they can do for you, and how you contact them. And of course, most importantly, how do you close out WIMRs? And doing it properly is very, very important, because if you don't do it properly, you could mess things up from not only a maintenance perspective, but also a financial perspective from California Wing. So we want to make sure you know how to do that. So we're going to cover that. Last but not least, what I'm going to cover is also the PCR, or the Pacific Region mobile toolkit that we have that's going to help you with doing a lot of what I just mentioned there. So on that, let's get right down to the meat of the presentation. This appears to be a very, very detailed picture here, but this, as Antonio had showed up before, this is your WIMR sheet, okay? It's purposely exploded and blurred there. There's a lot of information in WIMRs. There are tabs on the left-hand side. There are types of missions, types of sorties, number of missions, ground teams, aircrew teams, all kinds of things going on there. So we're not going to get into each specific element here, but more or less provide an overview to you of how to navigate through the WIMRs 2.0 system, so you can actually get stuff done and get in the airplane and go flying. There are two documents at the top of this slide that I do want to point out. One is the Civil Air Patrol Pilot Onboarding PDF. This presentation, of course, will be available to you. You can just click on that link and go right to it. But most importantly, there is a Group 2 pilot prep guide that has been provided too, and I think that was part of your homework that Antonio had provided to you prior to this meeting today. At the bottom of this giant area of WIMRs right here are tabs. These bottom tabs here are somewhat important, and I want to point out specifically the bottom tab of WIMRs on the left-hand side that's circled called Update. Anytime you do anything within your sortie, or this record locator thing we're going to talk about here shortly, is you have to update it. So if you change the time of your flight, if you change airplanes, if you add a person, if you take a person off, make sure, folks, that you click that update button, because if you go through a whole bunch of work and you load stuff up and you don't click the update button, it's going to default to the last position it was. So be sure, once you do something, click update. It's like hitting the enter button on your computer screen. So little tip and trick there. So let's kick off first with mission types. Civil Air Patrol provides a number of different types of missions for our customers. We have a wide variety of types of customers we have. Obviously the Air Force, the Forest Service Tree, local and state governments. There's a lot of different ways we accomplish the missions for Civil Air Patrol. The way it's laid out on the mission type is the Form 5, Form 91 are your evaluation. These are your check rides. Just like when you took your check ride to get your private pilot exam, your instrument rating or commercial rating, you had to take a check ride. Well, the Form 5/91 evaluation is a specific mission type or a flight designed for your check ride. So when you're ready to check your check ride, take your check ride, you'll be clicking this particular area. The Form 91 is for mission pilots. Once you're a transport mission pilot and you have met the criteria to become a mission pilot, you will also click that and set up your sortie as such for a Form 91. Many people have said, well, Peter, can you take a Form 5 and a Form 91 together? Yes, you can. It's very rare that you do that, but I would work with your check pilot and see if that's feasible for your skill set and if it makes sense for you in particular. Proficiency mission type is basically keeping current with your takeoffs and landings, your instrument approaches, and things like that. As we move down here, onboarding and return to flight. There are two sorties here. There's one primary sortie there. As you can see, it's had 129 people attend that, or set up sorties associated with that. That program is designed for people that have had expired Form 5s or Form 91s and returning them to flight after a long period of time of hiatus. So there is special funding money associated with that. And please check with your mentor pilot or your check pilot to see if you're eligible to participate in that return to flight program as we move forward. And then, of course, there's corporate miscellaneous missions, which are basically missions designed that if you want to take the airplane up on your own dime and utilize it, or if it's a CAP funded event, you would go under a corporate miscellaneous mission type. We're going to get a little bit more into the different types of missions as we move through this presentation. Symbols. These are referenced, of course, in CAP 72-2, which I think also was part of your homework. So please pull that up. So you're familiar with the different types of missions. There are, in a sense, only three types of missions or categories of missions. And they're designated by letters. A and B are Air Force assigned missions, or what we call AFAM missions. And then C are corporate missions. Those are corporate missions designated as a task performed for federal or national agencies or the military, must be Air Force assigned missions, but corporate missions may only be used to support agencies at or below the federal level. So as we've indicated there, Air Force assigned missions are A's, Air Force non-refundable are B, and then corporate CEP missions are C missions. If you're not sure what type of mission you're going to go on your type of flight, just check with your pilot or check with your somebody else. Even your flight release officer can help you out on that and on making sure you do it right. Profiles. When you fly, you want to fly with a purpose. And part of that is that, as we all know, Civil Air Patrol is not a flying club. There are plenty of flying clubs in the Bay Area for you to attend, but it is a purposeful environment of flying for the types of missions that we do. That being the case, there are certain mission profiles that have been set up. Airplane proficiency profile here, profile A, very common for beginning pilots. Basically is designed along with the ACS for a private pilot. Slow flights, stalls, steep turns, things of that nature. So we're trying to work these profiles similar to the type of training you've had to get your private pilot license. There are more advanced profiles. When we get into mission pilot training, there are specific mission pilot profiles that you would do, like contour switches and things like that. That's for another module. Sorties. Sorties, as I mentioned before when we first started the presentation, is simply a record locator. It's simply how we categorize what airplane you have and what is the record of the flight that you're going. This record locator, or sortie, is what gets managed. When you go out on a flight, that sortie is managed by your flight release officer. And I'll talk about the roles and responsibilities of that flight release officer later on in the presentation. But primarily, these are screenshots of WIMRs. This is a sortie record up here, a full sortie record across. My apologies for the slight blurriness. As you open up that sortie, you'll have flight release information, the time of your flight, for instance, where you're going to, where you're coming from, the type of airplane you're using, who's your crew contact, and who are your passengers. Here's an example of a flight that I took with Keith Breton back in November. And I've circled the sortie files. The sortie file button is illustrated at the top right-hand corner of the slide, and it basically shows you all the different things that I, as the pilot in command, have to upload into the sortie prior to contacting a flight release officer and getting release for my flight. I've got to upload some information. I have to upload receipts. Eventually, when I close it out, the TOLD, the takeoff and landing distance, I'll have to upload. And you can see where that's outlined here. So we dive into scheduling. Scheduling an airplane, there are two ways to do it. There is a scheduling module within WIMRs on the left-hand side of that drop down of that big screen I showed you at the first slide of the presentation. So you can click the scheduling module. It will open up a calendar, and you can simply pick a day, and you can see other airplanes that are in your area that may be scheduled for that day and time. And then if you want, you can click on that particular day, and it will open up a quick little snippet here, or widget. You can pick the tail number, the type of mission, the amount of hours, and you can, in a sense, reserve the aircraft for that date and time on the scheduling calendar. Now, it will also ask you if you'd like to create a sortie, right out the top. And once you create that sortie, you can go into the sortie and then fill out all your additional information. This is a very quick way to reserve an airplane at a particular date and time. You can, of course, always go into WIMRs 2.0, as Antonio had showed you before, and then go into a particular mission, go into and create a sortie that way also. This is just a quicker way to do it. It still takes you to the same place. So on that note, I'll pause just for a second. We'll check with the chat box and see if we have any questions so far.
So no questions on the chat, and if anybody has any question,
type it up. Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
It is being recorded, so we'd appreciate it. You just put it in the chat, and we could read them out. but you can always save them for the next answer in the chat box session. How's that? I'll go ahead and continue. So this section is basically you as PIC, what you're going to need to do and what you're going to need to view as you build your sortie and prior to reaching out to a flight release officer. So I'm going to go over the specific details that you're going to have to get your house in order prior to calling up. There's nothing worse than not having your whole package together and ready to go flying when you call the FRO and the FRO goes over a number of different checklists and something is missing. So it's always best to have all this information all ready to go, uploaded into Wimmers in the sortie files, and now you're ready to get released for your flight. So we're going to talk about the ORM checklist, the takeoff and landing data, the weight and balance, the discrepancy log, and the Form 104 area of Wimmers. And then we'll dive into what you're going to experience when you talk to an FRO. So first
so
off,
there's a question from the audience, actually.
Yes.
You said, I think he was referring to the previous slide. You said federal or below. What could that be? In other words, what is not federal or below?
Well, A missions and B missions are categorized by something that's either Air Force funded or Air Force use for insurance purposes, but not funded. That's a B mission. A C mission is, in a sense, pretty much anything else. And that carries a different level of insurance. All of this is indicated in the 70.1, and I forgot the other one, is it 72.2, I believe. That will categorize all the different mission types. So it's A, B, or C.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So let's talk about ORM here. This is a ORM checklist that we spent a tremendous amount of time on. This has been revised numerous times. And it's finally fine-tuned enough that it's actually incorporated within the sortie file of Wimmers. So you can click on the ORM button on your sortie, and this will pop up, and you can fill it out. For instance, the date submitted here, again, this was my flight with Keith. Airfield familiarity, the planned departure and landing locations, and the touch and goes that I might do. Am I familiar with that area? Am I familiar with flying into Oakland or Palo Alto or Livermore? Yes, in this particular case, I was familiar with those particular airports. The time of day, am I flying during the day, civil twilight, night? When am I doing this? So what we're doing is we're measuring the operational risk of the potential flight that I'll be going on. The temperature plays a big part, of course, into flying. So what is the local temperature that I have going here? There is a Celsius to Fahrenheit conversion, and you measure the temperature of the dew point here. You write those down. For those that use ForeFlight, it's very easy to pull that information up. Outside air temperature, right? That has a big factor in aviation. So as we move through this, every dot that we fill out here on the right-hand side indicates a particular score. Now, this is a sample guide of how scores are processed. And when those scores are all added up for whatever they might be, from low to moderate to high to extreme, there are weighted points. Those weighted points indicate an ORM score. If an ORM score is low, that means a standard flight release officer can release you. It's probably going to be a great clear, more than 6 miles of visibility, no wind, no icing. It's a local flight. But then when we get into more advanced flights like cross countries or instrument in IMC and things of that nature, those scores and the operational risk of those flights become much more important to analyze. So the risk is higher, hence the number goes up, hence a senior FRO might need to be required to release your flight. So take that into consideration. One point I do want to mention to everybody on this call here is that the ORM worksheet that you're filling out, even though you're PIC, is meant for your whole crew. So if your check pilot is familiar with the airports, then you can click familiar. If you are more familiar with something than somebody else is, then it's okay. But you are doing the ORM based on your full crew. So take that into consideration. So let's take a little bit about the takeoff and landing data calculator. I'm going to kind of see if I can slide this over here a little bit. This is an Excel spreadsheet. It's also available. You can download it, of course, on your iPad or on your iPhone and quickly do some calculations. This is a sample one that George had actually done, departing out of Oakland, returning back to Oakland. And you can see the drop-down menu here of the California airport, so you can just simply click it in. It's a great little tool to determine things. You can enter the barometer of the airport at the time, the temperature, the dew point, the takeoff weight of your aircraft. I think you have a drop down here of the aircraft. When you put your aircraft in under tail number, it would automatically load up the weight of the plane. It'll give you the longest runway length, the ground roll distance. It'll do all the total calculations for you, ready to go. And you can, as PIC, now analyze this and determine whether you are going to be speaking with an FRO or a senior FRO, depending upon runway and those conditions. So something to take into consideration. And I think I have some additional screenshots there for you as we move through this. For number one on the left-hand side, here's my flight, Livermore to Livermore. Okay. And the aircraft weighed 2,400 pounds. Simply, I was flying the 172, which is a great training aircraft. If any of you have an opportunity to fly it and get warmed up in CAP flying, I highly recommend using the airplane out of Livermore to do so. And then, as you can see, a regular standard FRO can release me based on the total record here. For number two here, this is, again, George's flight here. He was taking 183 Charlie Pop. He's departing Oakland, okay, and he's landing at Palo Alto. Well, he's taking off from a very large runway, and he's landing at a very small runway. So these are the things that the flight release officer wants to look at. You know, does that pilot have experience flying into Palo Alto before? Do they understand the restrictions of landing at a runway that's 2,400 feet long? What are some of those things to really analyze about the risk and the assessment of whether that's a really good idea to do? Of course it is, because we do it all the time, but these are just some of the things to think about as you do your told. If you're flying out to French Valley, or you're flying in the middle of nowhere to Bakersfield, or something to that effect, you put these in here and you can really get a good feeling about the runway lengths, how important it is, and how your airplane performance is going to really shine.
So we have a question from the audience, which I believe George already addressed. Is that correct? George?
Thank you, George.
Okay.
Yes, but I think it's a good question for everybody. If you want to repeat it.
Let me read it then. So when you create a schedule, you typically want to include pre and post-flight margin. However, when you opt to create sorties, the system synchronizes the sortie ETD and ETA times with the schedule. And some FROs insist those should reflect your planned wheels up and wheels down times. What is the general guidance?
I would say that the general guidance, at least from my point, would be to do top or bottom of the hour for your estimated time of departure, taking into consideration your run-up time and when you can actually get off the ground. That lets everybody that sees your particular sortie a really solid understanding of when you're going to be departing and when you intend on arriving back at that airport. Once you close out the sortie, and we'll get into closing out the sortie later on, you will actually put your actual time. So your ETD is what you actually believe you're going to go, and recommend top and bottom of the hour numbers.
Okay, we have another question. Where do you access the told spreadsheet from?
The told spreadsheet, I believe, is in our docs on the Teams. If not, we can load it up later in there. And you can download it and load it on your iPad or your phone or whatever you'd like to do that way.
And I'll make sure to load it up on the boards under the training channel that we reviewed before at the end of this talk. Thank you. Sure.
Anything else? Okay, we'll continue on here. Weight and balance. We all know how to do weight and balance. If you're a pilot, especially in Civil Air Patrol, weight and balance is going to be very, very important. Your weight and balance for your Cessna 172 out of Livermore is going to be different than the weight and balance of a larger airplane like the 206 out of Palo Alto. So for those that use ForeFlight, you're in great luck. The aircraft profiles are available to be uploaded, and you can utilize ForeFlight's weight and balance program to actually generate an image. Any other weight and balance mobile app or iPad app or Android app or whatever you have, I believe can also take that that file with the aircraft information, make sure it's accurate and up to date. That's available on the wing, and I think we have a link in our pilot information section that gives all the aircraft data. I know it's under the PCR mobile app, and I'll show that to you. So make sure that the math works out. Many of our pilots and you will probably have this, where you're going to be jumping from the 172 to the 182 to the 182R to the G1000 to the 206, and they all have different characteristics and different weights and things of that nature. So just because you did the weight and balance on one airplane, you can't copy, paste that, use that for the next airplane of a different make and model. You have to do a weight and balance for the particular airplane you are going to be flying. So make sure that those weights are proper when you're putting in. I released a flight a while back that the pilot had copied the information over from the 182 G1000 they flew, and they were now flying the 172. And well, there's a little bit of a weight difference between a 182 and a 172. So it was good to catch that, make sure it was correct. So the aircraft discrepancy log is very, very important here. It's what we call AMRAD. It's a link. I'll give a little screenshot of it here that will link you into the eServices section. You'll pull up the particular aircraft and you can look at the discrepancies. All airplanes have discrepancies. I don't know an airplane that doesn't have a discrepancy. Some of those discrepancies will prevent it from flying and some won't. So part of the checklist that will go over as an FRO to you as the PIC of the aircraft will be, are there any discrepancies on the aircraft? And you will probably say, yes, Peter, there are discrepancies on the aircraft. My next question to you will be, is it okay to fly with those discrepancies? So if you hadn't looked at the discrepancy log, because you know as an FRO, I've already seen the discrepancies of the aircraft that you're about to fly, your response is going to be very, very important. You're going to say, well, Peter, the seat's ripped. There's a carbon monoxide. There's no carbon monoxide indicator on the airplane right now. Well, is it okay to fly the airplane without a carbon monoxide indicator on it? So these are the questions I will challenge you if you haven't read the aircraft discrepancy log. So please make sure you fully understand the issues and the challenges that airplane might have prior to taking flight on it. Back in the Navy, we used to call that the gripe book. So make sure it doesn't have any gripes that are going to affect your flight. So one of the most important parts of your sortie when you fill it out, obviously, departure report, where are you going? Where are you departing from? Where are you going? Filling out all the additional boxes of information on here. I know it seems tedious, but it's very, very important for a couple of reasons. The first reason is because we need to keep track of where you're going, what you're doing, and what you plan on accomplishing once you're where you're at. The second thing is if there's ever an issue or challenge or problem with what that sortie is, we could go back and find out what your intended use was, and we can actually track you down that way if there's an issue. So make sure that all these boxes are filled out, the sortie objectives, okay? I'm doing a return to flight. I'm doing some air work. I'm doing some landings. I'm doing some takeoffs, emergency procedures, G1000 refresh, things of that nature, getting myself warmed back up so I can prepare for my Form 5 preparation and returning to flight. So what are the altitudes I'm going to be flying at? What air speeds? What emergency fields? And any other pertinent information here that is requested. When you fill out the briefing side of the 104, it really shows the FRO, when he reads it or she reads it, how thorough you are as a pilot of a Civil Air Patrol aircraft. If the FRO looks at this and there's a whole bunch of blank boxes and nothing's in them, that FRO is going to wonder if you're really ready to take on the role and responsibility of a CAP pilot. So fill out the boxes. It's really important. So once you've done all this,
we have a question.
Yes.
From the audience. So I believe AMRAD is not available until you have completed the Form 5. In other words, you are an approved CAP pilot. Is that right?
No, there's an aircraft discrepancy log button on the sortie, and I'll show it to you on a screenshot coming up here. You just click on that and view it. It'll say discrepancy log on it.
Okay, thank you.
I think that is correct. I think I mean, that button takes you to AMRAD, but AMRAD would not give you the squawks unless you're a CAP pilot. Unfortunately, this.
If somebody could do some offline checking on that and maybe send an email out. I haven't had any issues with it, and anybody I've released have never had an issue. They just click the aircraft discrepancy. So maybe for people that aren't, I'm not currently Form 5, and I clicked it and I got all the discrepancy. So
yeah, but
so
you were
Form
5.
But I was, yes.
So does that mean that if you're training for the Form 5, then your CAP instructor should look at the discrepancy then? Is that correct, George or Pete?
Yeah, so.
Good point there. Somebody should.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay.
Somebody on the flight that you were going on should look at the discrepancy log. So if there is a accessibility issue, that's another question. And if somebody could check that out, greatly appreciate it. So once you do that, you filled out your ORM, you filled out the told Excel spreadsheet, you've copied that image, you put it into the sortie file, you've done your weight and balance, you've uploaded that into the sortie file, you viewed the discrepancy log, you filled out the WIMR sortie Form 104 section for briefing. Now you're ready to reach out to the Group 2 Flight Release Officer email distribution list and request a flight release officer. So I put a sample email up that kind of works out. You are simply requesting a flight release for a particular mission or sortie, and you're giving a brief description of what it is, and that email will be sent to the distribution list, and somebody from the FRO list will pick it up. This is one way to reach out directly to the FR distribution list to get a flight release officer. Once that flight release officer contacts you, you can go back into the sortie and select under flight release officer icon. There's one right down there by your contact information on the sortie. Enter that person's name. So for instance, if I sent this email out to the distribution list and George replied back to me, Pete, I could release your flight on Saturday, no problem at all. Let me know when you want a brief, would be George's reply to me. I said, thanks, George. I'll just quick reply email and I'll set him up. So I'll go back into the sortie and I'll set George up as my flight release officer. And as soon as I click the magic word update, right? As soon as I update that sortie with George's information as FRO, George is going to be receiving an email. And that email is going to say, you've been designated as a flight release officer for Peter McCutcheon's sortie on this date and this time for this mission and this sortie number. So anywhere George is at, George can pull up his phone or his iPad or a computer, and he can release me right then and there based on the information in that email. So it's a very smooth and automated service. It works out very well, and it saves time for all of you future pilots to, geez, I need a flight release officer. Who do I contact? I got to call somebody. You don't have to call anybody. Just send an email out to the distribution list, and then I'm sure somebody will pick it up. So
one comment I want to add to that. So it's the first time I did it. So what I did, I uploaded the sortie and then click the update button. And of course, the FRO received the message. And then I went back to the sortie and start changing things. And so that then the FRO wrote me back and say, Antonio, I received 10 emails from you. Because basically every time you click the update button, the FRO will get a message. So yes. Basically make sure your sortie is complete and has all the entries first. And then when you're sure that everything is correct, then at the very, very, very last moment, you hit the update button.
Exactly. Very, very good point there. That's why you do those 5 things prior to contacting the flight release officer. You want to double check it, and double check it with your instructor pilot, or double check it with a mentor pilot, or double check it with somebody else prior to finishing that up. Reach out to the FRO distribution list. Okay, find somebody. They accept you. You're going to have a release officer, and then put the name in. Antonio is exactly right. That'll happen. Good. Any additional questions we can dive into? All good? Okay, we'll continue on, making some good time here. So the flight release officer and the senior flight release officer are, in a sense, one and the same person. They go through the same training, the same, but the senior flight release officer has more authority because they're capable of releasing more complex flights than the regular flight release officer. In fact, sometimes flights are so complex that they warrant not only a senior flight release officer, but they need a wing commander's approval to release that flight. So there are different levels of complexity of sorties and flights, right? So there are different level of authority to release those flights. That's basically the differences between the flight release officer and the senior flight release officer. I added a little snippet here of what I, as an FRO, would see once your sortie is completed and you are ready to be released. We've already texted, we've already chatted. Peter, I'm ready for my release. I will pull up your sortie and I will see a whole bunch of information. But basically what I'm looking for is, have you filled out or clicked on the ORM worksheet? And it will say not entered. If you click here to complete ORM, it'll take you right to that checklist. It'll open up a separate tab in your browser and you can go right through the questions. And remember, your ORM checklist is the operational risk management of your whole crew, not just yourself. The FRO checklist, okay, is not complete. The FRO checklist is a checklist that I, as your FRO, will generate. I will click on this checklist here, and I have a screenshot of it, and I'll show you what those questions are like. And we will go step by step through that checklist together, and you're going to respond to me on answering those questions. One of those questions, as I mentioned before, what are the discrepancies of the aircraft? Okay, is it okay to fly with the discrepancies of that aircraft? Two of the most important questions on that FRO checklist are also, what do you believe, as the PIC, are the primary risks of this flight? And you're gonna say, well, Peter, the weather might be coming in, there might be traffic, there's gonna be some jumpers over at Byron, it's mountainous terrain, I'm flying to Tahoe, so we got density altitude because it's in the middle of summer and it's a high area with, it's very hot. There are a lot of risks there. So my next question to you as future PICs, I'm going to say, what are you going to do about mitigating those risks? And you're going to go through all the things that you just listed that are going to be riskful, and you're going to indicate to me what you are going to do to, mitigate those risks. So once that's done on the FRO checklist, there's a little box here under approve, and I'm simply going to check that. Here's that discrepancy log button, by the way. And then I'm going to ask you about the I'm safe checklist. I trust everybody on this call knows what the I'm safe checklist is. I'm not going to go through each one of the IMSAFEs for each one of you on the crew. I expect that if I ask you, have you gone through I'm safe, and you'll say yes in the affirmative, I'm assuming that you have your affirmative for everything that's indicated on the I'm safe checklist. If you are not comfortable with any one of those IMSAFEs, then I need you to tell me that, Peter, I'm feeling a little bit more stressed out than usual. I know, I just got in a fight with my dog and the dog's not really happy with me and I'm a little stressed out about it. Well, maybe you shouldn't get in a fight right now. Once I agree that your I'm safe is good, again, for the whole crew, I have spoken to you live and in person. I'm going to put my CAP ID number down and my password, and I'm going to therefore release your flight. When I release a flight, I've taken a responsibility for your safe departure and arrival back using a CAP asset. So there's a tremendous amount riding on my shoulders that you're doing all the right things to mitigate those risks. You should be receiving an email in your inbox indicating you have been released from for the flight. If you have not received that email, please give me a call back or the FRO back and say, I haven't gotten an email back. I don't know if I'm released or not. And double check, there might be an email hang up. But don't leave the ground in that airplane unless you get an email saying you've been released. So
we have another question from the audience.
Yes.
Which partly was addressed by George. If there is, so when we hit on WEMRS, when we hit the FRO list button, we are presented with a list of FROs. Is it okay to email only those FROs that are in that list and ask which one would be willing to take us up? I mean, take that flight, or should we just pick one FRO out of that list?
Very, very good question. Some missions that you might be flying might have a select group of FROs assigned to it. For instance, the return to flight sortie, okay, or mission type is restricted to FROs such as George and Keith and Noel and some of our senior staff and DOVs, because they're the ones responsible for managing not only the flights, but also the budget of how many times somebody's flown. So on those particular flights, yes, you'll have a drop down of flight release officers, and only those 3 or 4 or 5 flight release officers will be allowed to release that particular flight. It is best, though, however, for anything other that's a regular Cal miscellaneous or proficiency flight, that you utilize the distribution email list and reach out, because there are a lot of FROs out there, okay? And once in group 2, and then once that email gets sent out, that FRO can reach out to you and say, yes, I will do your flight for you. I will release your flight. Once that acknowledgement happens, then select the person in the sortie. Don't select the person in the sortie first and say, yeah, I think I want George to release my flight. Well, George might not be available to do your flight, okay, because you hadn't spoken to him prior to it. So it's best to use the distribution list first, find a body, then load that body up once that body approves. Is that clear?
It's clear to me. I don't know if it's clear to the audience. I believe so. Nobody responding on the chat line, so it looks like it is clear.
All right, terrific.
But if it's not, you guys feel free to post comments, more comments on the chat line.
Please
Thank
do.
you.
Yeah. Well, great. This part of the presentation I think is very important. I wish somebody had done this for me when I was going through flight training. As you go through your training and your tests, and you have to understand all these CAP 71, 70, 70-1, 72s, all these numbers. Again, many of them were indicated in the homework assignment. It gets confusing after a while. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to take a couple seconds here, and I'm going to read some excerpts out of our master document of CAP flying, and that's the 70-1. It's been revised March of 2020, and there's a lot of really good information on here. You are going to be tested on this information when you take your Form 5 examination test through the LMS system, which Antonio will talk about later on down the road. But I selected a few paragraphs here and I want to read them to you so they kind of resonate when you or start to do your flight training, why they're there. The first is the PIC must obtain a flight release from a designated FRO, either a person, via voice communication, okay? Voice communication method, phone, radio, whatever it might be, no more than 24 hours prior to takeoff. Okay, so I can't release you a week from now to go flying, next week sometime. It has to be 24 hours. The PIC shall notify the FRO of any changes affecting the risk assessment that occur after the release, but prior to takeoff. So you and I go through the process of releasing your flight. Pete, I'm good to go. I'm headed to the airport, and we're going to go flying today. It's going to be really, really good. Well, on the way to the airport, you get into a minor fender bender or something to that effect. Okay, maybe insurance, the police get called out, the insurance companies are going to get involved, and you're looking at your watch, you're thinking, I think I can still make the flight. Well, you make it to the airport because you called an Uber or whatever like that, and maybe you're not safe to fly. There is a change in your ORM based on the time I released you to the time that you took off. So I need to know about that accident. I need to know about anything that happened to you prior to you leaving the ground in the airplane. Number two, the CAP Director of Operations will publish an RM score ranges in WIMR that define the level of authority for flight release. I showed you a little bit of graph there, where they go from low to medium to moderate to high to extreme. Okay, based on those scores, flight release levels include an FRO, a senior FRO with the concurrence of a wing or higher commander, vice commander of director of operations, or the CAP director of operations or designees within the NOC. So as I mentioned before, depending upon the level of complexity of your flight, and we don't expect you to have very complex flights as you're starting to learn how to fly, there might be a different level of FRO that releases you. The next paragraph is the FRO is responsible for verifying the appropriate information, authorizing you as the CAP pilot to fly as pilot in command. That means I got to know that your medical's current, that your pilot license is in the sortie file. All this stuff will be loaded up and you don't have to reload it on every sortie. It's just that it's already in your pilot record. So verifying the use of the appropriate code, mission symbols, are you on the right mission? If not, notify that the flight was safely concluded and extended. The FRO is responsible for initiating a missing aircraft procedure at time of determined release. So your estimated time of departure, estimated time of return, part of the checklist on the FRO checklist is I'm going to add probably close to maybe 2 hours after that. And if I don't hear from you, cell phone call or whatever it might be, within those 2 hours, I have a particular procedure to activate a missing aircraft procedure. So one of the things that we do on this particular section is that at time of run-up, either you, your check pilot, and observer can simply text me saying, Peter, engine start, or wheels up in 5 minutes. That way I know that you're about to take off. And then when you come down and you land, somebody in the airplane, or when it's safe for you to do so yourself, you can text me and go, wheels down, heading to fuel. Or at fuel, you can do it also. Whatever works, but I have immediate text notification as your FRO about where you are. Of course, part of your pre-flight would be to ensure that your on-track tracking is on in the airplane so we can pull you up on the computer and actually see where you're flying. That's part of your checklist. You'll see that when you get into checklists later on down the road. So just want to make sure. Any FRO may approve a sortie for takeoff when the departure runway is at least longer than the calculated takeoff distance ground roll plus the landing distance ground roll at the actual takeoff weight of the aircraft being flown. Okay, this goes back to your told. Okay, and for glider tows, basically there's a little bit different characteristic. So that's how that's calculated. The PIC must obtain a release from a senior FRO when the departure runway is shorter than the calculated takeoff distance roll, ground roll, plus the landing distance ground roll at the actual takeoff weight of the aircraft being flown. So an FRO has one side, 7.1. A senior FRO has another side or another authority to do so. So again, based on the told. Real-time risk management, okay? CAP pilots must continue to apply risk management and sound judgment throughout the execution phase of flight operations. To the maximum extent possible, the PIC shall is a mandatory word, just like must, and execute the mission at the planned briefed risk level, accept no unnecessary risk. When risk elevates above the approved flight release, the PIC shall take a positive action to reduce that risk as low as reasonably possible. If a risk cannot be contained to a release level, a mission abort should be considered. So risk, as we all know, ebbs and flows. Okay, so when that risk goes higher than what you've been released for, recommendation for reevaluating, mitigating that risk, or aborting the mission. Any FRO may approve an IFR sortie when forecast conditions, including temporary conditions, for departure and arrival airports meet or exceed an 800-foot ceiling and 2 miles of visibility or approach minimums, whichever is higher, assuming no other factors in risk management process require higher approval. So that is kind of the limitation we have as FROs, that if it's 800 and 2 miles viz, we're able to release that for you. The PIC must, again, mandatory word, obtain a release from a senior FRO for any IFR sortie when forecast conditions, including temporary conditions for departure and arrival, are lower than your 802 miles visibility, but not below 500 feet ceiling or 1 mile visibility. That's a whole nother world. And last but not least, only senior flight release officers with the concurrence of a wing or higher commander, vice commander, or director of operations may approve an IFR sorties down to FAA minimums. I think I got cut off at the end. So BFRO checklist. This is the big checklist. This is the one that I'm going to read to you that we're going to take our time on. I'm going to verify that you were flying November 499 Charlie Papa. It's a 172 G1000. Maintenance was, are there any maintenance discrepancies for the aircraft? Yes, there are maintenance discrepancies for the aircraft. Is the pilot aware of those discrepancies? Are there any? Did you review them with the pilot? In either case, did you confirm that the pilot can fly with these discrepancies? Yes or no? Is it legal to fly with the discrepancies? Does it make sense to fly with the discrepancies? So now we're really analyzing some things. Things are broken on the airplane. We realize that. Is it legal and does it make sense to fly? So we're trying to apply some common sense on this. And then as we go down here, the different type of mission, here's the sorting number. Are you flying within the 50 nautical mile area? Are you going to be doing a flight plan? What is your route of flight? Do you have a VFR flight plan or an IFR flight plan? Many times for your training flights, this will be just direct. And are all destinations along the flight authorized for CAP aircraft? Hence, are they paved California runways that are in the AFD? And that's a little sample of what that checklist is. As I mentioned, some of the more important questions out at the bottom are, what's the biggest issue or challenge you might have with that flight? And you'll indicate what those are, and we'll discuss them on how you can alleviate some of those stresses and risks. So let me, before we get into the actual debrief, let me go ahead and pause just for a second here and see if anybody has any questions.
There are no questions on the chat line, but if anybody has any question,
okay,
please go ahead.
All right. Thank you. So let's talk about after you've landed the Form 104 debrief, closing out your Wimmer sortie, loading up your TAC and hobs, and then the Form E108 that you'll do. So let's go over each one of those. The screenshot that I have here on the right, there's a button. There's a lot of red on this page, and I want everybody to kind of pay attention. I'm going to try to go through it as thorough as I possibly can. There is, at the bottom of the Wimmers page, once you land, there is a Form 104 button that will help you with filling out the debrief information. Here's some sample boxes of what that debrief information is. Basically, you're going to load up the TAC and the hobs, start finish. Everybody here as a pilot knows how to do that. It's very, very important to not mix up your hobs numbers with your TAC numbers and your TAC numbers with your hobs numbers. Some aircraft out there are very close in numbers on the TAC side and the hobs side, and it would be very easy on the chicken scratch on your ForeFlight or your notebook or your knee-board or whatever it might be to mix those numbers up. So one suggestion that I do have is that when you fill out the aircraft book before your flight with your name and your passengers and you verify the TAC and hobs time, that you pull out your iPhone or your Android or whatever it might be and take a picture of the book so you know what those numbers are. So when you're back home closing out your Wimmer sortie, you have what the original numbers are. Also, when you write those down and you fill those in, double check your math before you click submit. So you want to make sure, okay, if I'm flying 1.2 hours, did I really fly 1.2 hours? Yeah, I did. And then you can manipulate the times here on what your transit time was to and from and the calculation. The right-hand side, because this was a return to flight sortie for me, this was paid by National Headquarters for the funding that we had. So I used the credit card that's actually in the book to go to the pump and fill it up at Five Rivers there in Livermore, and indicated right off the receipt what the fuel cost was, if there was any oil used at all, and what the receipt number was. I actually keyed that right in there. If for some reason I didn't use any fuel at all for a flight, which is kind of rare to do. But if something happened and no fuel, I didn't need to refuel it or whatever it would be, you would click the no fuel button there. You want to double check with your instructor pilot or somebody else if before you close the sortie out, if you check no fuel. Because once you click the no fuel button here, that sends a different set of rules to Colonel Jim Crum, who handles a lot of the finances here, and it's very difficult to undo a no fuel closed sortie. So just say food for thought there. If you did pay for this on your own, you just fill it out here. You don't have to do the receipt side of things because this is on your own dime. But we can get into that with your mentor. You can get into that with your mentor pilot as you move ahead. Filling out the results of the deliverables. This is my deliverable. I did flight maneuvers, stalls, steep turns, etc. I filled this out completely. It was a VFR flight with light wind. It was a successful completion of return to flight. It's very important to fill out these 3 boxes down here. And it might seem like a little tedious. Well, I was just on a VFR flight. The key here is that return to flight budget funding is audited. And when it's audited, senior officials within Civil Air Patrol look and say, okay, how well did they utilize that budget money? And if we're filling out all the things that we did in the 1.2 hours that I used the Air Force's money, that's justification to get more money to return to flight. So fill out the document in case we ever get audited, and it helps support what we're doing. TAC and Hobbs, actual departure time, actual arrival time, right? This view closeout information. TAC and Hobbs again, it's a little closer for you. NHQ National Credit Card here. And my crew contact information, the sortie files are right there. Discrepancy log is right there. Again, this is on the what the closed out WIMRs would look like once you do close out your sortie and get it done that way. So let's talk about something that's very, very important when we start using the credit card that's in the aircraft, especially for return to flight or any other type of mission associated to use that credit card. And it would be basically filling out a Form 14 and an E108. An E108 is simply an expense report. For those that are in business that fill out company expense reports, your E108 is a company expense report. It's either an expense report that's going to reimburse you for some money, or it's an expense report that's going to show that you actually owe some money. These are all done electronically now. Okay, and if you're not signed into the Civil Air Patrol system to register under the E108 program, please do so. Your bank account information, your contact information, there's a separate section in WIMRs to do that. So please make sure that you do that prior to any flights. So this will be a very smooth process to get you reimbursed for any out-of-pocket expenses that you may have had during the flight.
We have a question
Yes.
from the audience.
Go ahead.
Okay, so as I understand, if we check no fuel, as I understand it, we check no fuel if it's not a reimbursable mission. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct. No fuel is you didn't fuel the airplane at all for that. If it's a non-reimbursable mission, you can. And George, keep me honest on this. I believe you can still put in how much fuel you put into the airplane, because the next pilot that does a Cal miscellaneous can actually see on the sorties. Because if hypothetically you filled it up to, say, the 172, you filled it up to 22 gallons, and it really should have been filled up to 25 gallons. Okay, you just shorted the pilot coming up 3 gallons of fuel. So it's good to categorize that within the sortie on how much fuel and how much you paid for it. So there's a record of it.
And then there is also a comment here. Even on self-funding flights, we are now required to upload the fuel receipt, change found in orientation document. This helps Colonel Crum in faster forensic searches when FBO randomizes receipts billing to national by charging the national card, even when the CAP member uses their card at the fuel truck.
So let me see if I understand the question properly here. Are you using your personal card or are you using the national card?
That's not a question. That's actually a comment. They changed the policy, and that was the reason. It really helps Colonel Crum if we upload our fuel receipts, even if it's self-funded.
Steve, thanks for the clarification on that. So self-funded upload then. So you're going to be doing Form 14s even if it's self-funded, correct?
That's right. And if it's a no fuel sortie, then no E108 or anything. But if you do fuel at all, just like you said, they want documents.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification on that, Steve. Appreciate that.
So I would like a clarification on that too. So if I upload, so even if it's I pay out of my credit card, I still upload the fuel receipt, but then I will not put the amount, or I will still put the amount on Wimmers. I will put the amount on Wimmer, just will not check the box of National Headquarters credit card. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is correct.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Correct. Because when Jim does a reconciliation, he's only looking for NH, the national account. Exactly. Right. So let's take both of those examples that Steve and Antonio have brought up here. You fuel the aircraft up, and then you get a receipt from the pump. Okay. How many of you have fueled an airplane and the pump that you have doesn't have any more paper in it, and you can't get a receipt? Well, you're flying a CAP airplane. You have to get a receipt somehow. So you have to go to the FBO, or you have to call the FBO tomorrow morning or whatever it might be, and ask them to email you a copy of the receipt from that pump. So it happens all the time. In case of Five Rivers here, this receipt was emailed to me the next day because the pump ran out of paper. So once I got that receipt, I have all the information in that receipt here, the MasterCard, that was the national account MasterCard. I pulled up the PCR mobile app section, and there's a little button I'm going to show you in a couple seconds here that shows Form 14, and there's a way you can upload that receipt into that Form 14. You type in it's a little app, that's all it is, and it loads up all the pertinent information, Five Rivers, the sortie, the mission type, all the stuff that Jim Crum wants to audit, all right? The date of the service, my CAP ID, the airplane I flew, the HOBS, price per gallon, the amount of gallons I had, and return to flight, the sortie number. So once that Form 14 is loaded up in the app, you can submit it into the Wimmer sortie, and it will load up. So that being the case, you've done your Form 14. It's all automated right there on the PCR mobile tools, and I'll show that to you here in a second, as I mentioned. And then you're going to go over here under the Finance Admin Tool button of Wimmers. Remember that long menu on the left-hand side of Wimmers, and you're going to click Create E108. And it's going to walk you through a number of different items to upload and make sure it's done. It's going to give you an example of what your E108 is based on your Form 14. And then you're going to click Submit. It's going to send it off to the cloud, National Headquarters or Jim Crum or whatever, and it's going to be submitted in through California Wing Processing. And then you'll get a notification back saying that your E108 has been submitted with a copy of it. I couldn't find my E108 email return, but I did find a confirmation from Cal Wing that my Form 14 was processed and attached here on the PDF. So there's a tremendous amount of email communication on your California Wing address back and forth when you submit things in. Flight releases, everything's done electronically now, which really, really helps out. This is the famous PCR mobile tool. Please go to https://mobile-tools.pcrcap.org and download it. Every one of you on this call is going to need this app to be a successful CAP pilot. It will give you the FRO list. Who's an FRO? Let's find out. It'll have the toll calculator on it, okay? You can do it right on your phone or your iPad or whatever it might be, or as Antonio will do, he will load up the Excel spreadsheet under the team's information. Check pilots, here's a list of our group check pilots. Also, all the aircraft information to load up into your ForeFlight. And then, of course, that infamous Form 14, where you can click that button right there and load up your receipt. It's a very, very useful tool, very handy, and I applaud the team at our Cal Wing IT department that actually put this together. Really, really good stuff. So on that note, any additional questions? That pretty much wraps it up for my section of this presentation today.
So we have two more questions. What if there is no FBO at the airport? Would the airport manager be able to provide a receipt?
I'm sure somebody that is responsible for that remote fuel service system will be able to. Now, if there is no FBO, there's no airport manager, there's no whatever, take a picture of the contact information on the pump. This aviation fuel system is managed by Acme Fuel Services Division, and here's their phone number. Then, call Acme Fuel Services tomorrow morning. They can pull the record from the pump and email it to you.
And the second question is there a difference between the Excel for told and the told tool in a PCR?
There shouldn't be any difference on it.
Okay.
Yep. The told form on PCR is the PCR. It's simply, these are apps. These are just apps like on your iPhone, and they have they represent a button to get to a list or a button for a functionality. That's all. Anything else? All right, I will stop sharing here and pass the baton back to you, Antonio, unless you'd like me to go to the next slide. If you want to continue on, I can drive for you.
What's the next slide? Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah, so at this point, I'm going to basically present it by sharing my screen so people can see what I'm doing here. Okay. Thank you, Pete, by the way. Great presentation. Okay, so you guys can see this. So again, we are back to eServices. So the next module, we said the three major tools that we're going to be using in our training for the Form 5 are Weimers, which we just talked about, and then the learning management system. So, and then the final one was OpsQual. So let's start with the LMS system. Really, the new system, the new learning management system, is called Access. Here you can still find some old modules that at times you still need to take them from these older page, but all the new modules, especially those ones for the Form 5, are under Access. So you basically click on Access, and it will take you to this new page here. And to identify the modules, specifically here, we're talking about videos or questionnaires that you're going to have to bring the day of your Form 5. So you click on Course Catalog, and then there is a scroll down menu here, and you can see there is a lot of different topics. What we're mostly interested in is Pilot. So if you click on Pilot, you'll see all the modules that are related to their pilot specific. So for instance, if I want to do a cadet orientation pilot endorsement quiz for ROTC, I'm going to click on Enroll and then open the course, and it's going to show me all the modules that I need to take to take that the class. And many times there will be a quiz at the end, and after you pass the quiz successfully, then you'll be presented with some of these modules with a certificate that sometimes you need to upload or bring it to the Form 5. So now another way to look at those modules, so this is under Course Catalog. You can go back to Main Portal. If you go back to Main Portal, it'll show you a bunch of different sections. So one section is the courses that are in progress. then we have the courses not started. Those are the ones that I enrolled for. And sure enough, you can see the cadet orientation pilot endorsement quiz for ROTC, which is the one I just selected. So it will appear here. So if you got lost, or if you went to a different page and then you want to come back, you will not find a course anymore in the course catalog. You need to come back to the main portal and then come here, start a class, and go through all these modules, basically. So very simple. This is how Access works. You'll be using this. We'll be using this Access very often throughout this training. Many of the homeworks are going to be at this page. So before I move on to the next one, is there any question? You guys can ask the question directly at this point. While I go back to eServices. Again. Okay, so that was Access. Now let's go and look at the ops quals. All right, so ops quals is what shows all your specialty qualifications in general for emergency services, but more specifically also for your pilot certificates. So if I click on ops qual, I can see this menu here. So we have one tab that is more in general, a broader tab for emergency services. So if I click on the 101 card, and then I enter my name or my CAP ID, then it shows my 101 card and shows all the specialty qualifications here. So these are, as I said, these are all the emergency services qualifications, not just the pilot specific. Like for instance, you see that I'm an MSA, for instance. If I want to know what MSA is, I'll go through this legend and find out an MSA mission staff assistant. But also there will be those specialties that are pilot specific, such as mission pilot or transmission pilot. And then this date shows when it expires. So in July 2021, for instance, I'm due for the 491 to renew my mission pilot, or transmission pilot will be, I just did it in December, so will not be due until next year, until December this year. And then I can go back to another interesting tool here is Squitters. So what Squitter does, it shows you for each of those qualifications, what are the requirements what are the tasks that you need to pass in order to complete that task. And so for instance, if we look at the transport mission pilot, it shows up like this, and it shows you when it's green, it means you already accomplished, you already satisfied that task. And so there's a number of different tasks that you need to satisfy. Once they're all green, then it means you passed, you accomplished that specialty qualifications. So as you see, again, there is all kind of specialty qualifications, not just the pilot related ones. Now, if we want to know more specifically about the pilot related tasks, then we'll go to this other tab that is labeled as pilot, and we're gonna start reviewing this one. What do I need? So what do I need tells you, it's a useful tool because it tells you, as it states, like what do I need to become something. So for instance, if I hit what do I need for becoming a VFR pilot, then it will show me all the things that I need, specific things that I need to become a VFR pilot. Okay, so for instance, we have FAA pilot certificate. So we need to upload the certificate, which we're going to show in a little bit how to do it. We're going to need our medical. You can see that here I used to do the Now you know my age too. I'm over 40. I used to do the class 3 medical certificate. This year, actually, I tried the basic medical. So that's also acceptable for the Form 5. The flight reviews shows the Form 5 when I completed it, and so forth. So whenever there are tasks under this list that have not been completed, it will show up with this red flag, meaning not complete. And you can actually go, you can do this very interactively. If you want, you can open a different window and just log in and see where you're at with this list of tasks. And basically, that will tell you what you need to do to become a VFR pilot. Yeah, there's a bunch of other endorsements here, complex, high performance, and so forth. Now, if I click on, for instance, if I want to go back and look at, so this is as you get as you pass the Form 5, then you'll become effectively a VFR pilot. Now, if you want to become a transport mission pilot, the minimum requirement is that you have 100 hours as PIC. And that will be shown here. In fact, as you see, you need 100 hours and plus you need to pass all these classes. You have to have 50 hours of cross country and so forth and so forth. How do you show that? How do you show that you have 100 hours PIC time? How do you show that you have 50 hours cross country? Well, you need to upload documents, and that's again one of the things we're gonna show later on. You can see also a requirement for 175 hours. This is for becoming a mission pilot. This is one of the requirements for mission pilot. In fact, if I go here, then I should be able to see that. There we go. It shows 175 hours. And going back to transmission pilot, there's two other requirements. 200 hours, and as you will study, or many of you already know, 200 hours is the minimum requirement for cadet O-rides, and 300 hours instead is for ROTC, Air Force cadets, to do orientation rides, orientation flights for ROTCs. Okay, so how do I view my qualification? Well, still going, it's right here. So again, if we want to go back from square one, again, it's going to be what do I need, and then view qualification. So if I hit here, this shows all the qualifications that I have. And these are under the tab pilot, shows all the pilot-specific qualifications that I have. So there's the medical, there is the orientation pilot, different ratings, and so forth. And for each of these, I basically had to upload a document on OpsQuals. There's other tabs that we're not interested in right now, like for instance, driving license, communication. But for the purpose of this class, we are mostly interested in this tab, in the pilot tab. So this shows you an overview of where you are at and what's active. Okay, now let's look at how we actually upload the documents. And if you, as part of the homework, we had to take a picture, digital picture of the different documents, FAA documents. So if you have those available, we can actually do it now, or I can stay for a few minutes after this call, after we stop the recording, and upload those documents. But basically, so here's how you do it. Basically, so you go to you saw a view. I click on a view and upload documents, and then pilot-specific documents. And then, for instance, if I want to update my medical or my basic med, this year I did a basic med, so I'll just upload the basic med certificate, and then choose file, and it will direct me to the file that I need to upload, basically. So that's how you do it here. And what else? So in here you can see all the documents that I've uploaded over the years. So different Form 5s, different medicals, different certificates, the 100 hours, 200 hours, 300 hours. So these are effectively, they're like pictures that you take on of your endorsements. Like for instance, if I upload this one, I'm not sure you can see this. Probably not. I will have to share this one. But basically, you take a picture of a screenshot of your for-fly logbook or what have you, and just upload it here. Likewise, can be a any other picture of your say logbook, paper logbook, and so forth. So yeah, so once you've done uploading, so okay, so that's so once you upload these documents, so they will stay in the system, and then if you want to go now, so in this way, what we did, we basically uploaded all our documents, our medical certificates, FAA certificates, on the ops walls. Now the next step is to go to FAA requirements, and here you're gonna have to select what's your certificate gonna be. So it's gonna be, for instance, in my case, SEL certificate, and I need to. So I'm gonna click this one, and then on the medical, I'm gonna click on the basic med this year. So I'm gonna click here, put the date when I did the course and exam for basic med, and then possible training. So I have a complex and high performance aircraft. And then once I click on all these boxes, then I click submit, and these ones will turn yellow. And then when these qualifications are approved, they will finally turn into green. So they will check your documents, make sure that what you're saying is correct, that you actually have an FAA certificate. They will check that you actually indeed bring did upload the picture of the medical and all the other endorsements. And so if everything makes sense, then they will approve your request, and all this part will turn in green. So this is something that you can do right away. And as you do it, you basically take your first step towards the Form 5. One last thing that we can look at is the aircrafts. So again, we go under the tab pilot and subsection airplane. And if we do go under airplane, this is what you do. So this will be uploaded automatically. This is the questionnaire that you need to complete under WEMRS, under Access, after reviewing the CAP regulation 70-1. So this will be automatic. As soon as you pass the quiz, then this will turn green. But there are other things that you need to do, like orientation pilot, G1000 VFR, high performance demo. So these are all things that you're gonna do after you take the Form 5. You'll have to upload, the physical Form 5, and then check these boxes. And then at that point, you officially have the Form 5. You will officially be recognized to pass the Form 5, and you will officially become a VFR pilot. So that was pretty much it. So if there are any questions, we can address those.